Nothing in the kingdom truly changes until the king changes. Tolkien revealed this law in The Lord of the Rings. The kingdom of Rohan wasn't saved by strength or strategy, but by the restoration of its king. When Gandalf frees Théoden, something far deeper than a spell is broken. What is revealed is a mythic law that governs not just Rohan, but every kingdom, every leader, and the king within each of us. Let's dive into Middle-earth to uncover the King's Law. Rohan was not always a kingdom in decline. It was once one of the great realms of men. Its people were known as the Rohirrim, the Horse Lords. They lived on open plains, and their strength came from movement and speed. Where Gondor rose in towers and citadels, Rohan rode beneath the open sky. In the early years of the Third Age, Earl the Young answered Gondor's call for aid. He rode to their defense against the orcs and Easterlings, and drove the enemy from the land. In gratitude, an oath was sworn. Upon the tomb of Elendil, on the holy mountain of Amon Anwar, Sirion, the steward of Gondor, called upon Eru Ilúvatar, the One, to witness the bond. Such an invocation was rare, reserved only for kings. And in that moment, the land of Rohan was given. A kingdom was founded under heaven. Generations passed, and the crown of Rohan came at last to Théoden, son of Thengel, the 17th king of Rohan, heir to the house of Eorl. He did not inherit a broken kingdom, but life began to take its toll. When his son, Theodred, was born, his wife, Elfhild, died. Not long after, his sister Theodwyn and her husband were taken as well, and so Théoden became more than a king. He took their children, Éomer and Éowyn, and raised them as his own. Years passed, the borders of Rohan grew restless, orc raids increased, the wild men of Dunlan pressed in from the west. War did not arrive all at once. It came slowly, and with it a growing heaviness. For many years, Théoden ruled wisely, but with the weight of loss and the burden of ruling, his strength began to fade. The king still sat upon the throne, but something within him was beginning to change. And it was in this season of quiet weakening that another power was already at work. Saruman was not an enemy by origin. He was the first of the Istari, emissaries sent by the Valar to aid the free people against the rising shadow of Sauron. He came as a guide, as a counselor, and he chose to dwell at Isengard, on the very borders of Rohan. At its center stood the Tower of Orthanc, whose name in the tongue of Rohan meant cunning mind. Saruman was ambitious, a brilliant mind, a master of technology. He studied the works of the enemy he was meant to oppose, especially the Rings of Power, and in doing so, he drew the eye of Sauron. Through the Palantir, the Dark Lord did not merely threaten him, he promised him power. What began as service turned toward domination, and Saruman silently started to plot against Rohan. But he did not march openly against it, he weakened it first. While building his armies in secret, he worked to neutralize the kingdom from within, and so the shadow reached the heart of the kingdom. Théoden still sat upon the throne, but he no longer looked like a king. He appeared far older than his years, bent, weakened, as if life itself was slowly leaving him. He did not rule, he endured. At his side stood Grima Wormtongue. He spoke softly, always cautiously in the name of concern. His counsel discouraged action, his words fed doubt, his advice urged delay and retreat. Grima had not come on his own, he had been placed there, a voice of weakness sent by Saruman, and the king listened to him. Theodred, the king's son, was already dead, the future of the line was gone. Éowyn remained behind the throne, burdened with care, watching the slow decline of the house she loved. And beyond the walls, the kingdom was stripped of its strength. Éomer and with him the riders of Rohan were cast out. The throne remained, The crown still rested upon the king's head, but the will to rule had been quietly taken away. And in this moment, when Rohan stood at the edge of collapse, Gandalf arrived, with Aragorn, Gimli, and Legolas at his side. He came as an old man, appearing frail and unthreatening. The guards let them pass, but when Grima saw the staff, he ordered them to act. Resistance on the physical plane had begun. Aragorn, Gimli, and Legolas engaged the guards, allowing Gandalf to advance toward the king. Théoden remained seated, diminished, held beneath Saruman's will. As Gandalf drew near the throne, a new battle began.
I release you from the spell. You have no power here, Gandalf the Grey.
Gandalf's command failed, not because the words were wrong, but because authority had not yet been revealed.
I will draw you, Saruman, as poison is drawn from a wound.
After his fight against the Balrog, Eru, the One, sent Gandalf back to Middle-earth, and Saruman was no longer the White. Gandalf was.
Begone!
At that moment, the spell was broken. Théoden's body straightened. Color returned to his face. The fog around him began to lift. Théoden breathed freely again. He recognized Gandalf. He spoke of dark dreams. And for the first time in years, the king reached for his sword again. Théoden had returned, but it was just the beginning. As the king stood again, Saruman's army was already on the march. Orcs poured out from Isengard, moving towards Rohan with a single purpose: destroy the world of men. Gandalf and Aragorn urged Théoden to ride out and meet them in open battle. But the king chose otherwise. He ordered the people to withdraw to Helm's Deep. The choice was heavy, but he decided. Helm's Deep was not about glory, it was about preservation, about holding what remained, about surviving the full force of Saruman's will, and so Rohan retreated behind stone. As night fell, the people of the Mark stood enclosed within the fortress, while an army, unlike any they had faced before, gathered outside its walls. That night, Helm's Deep was shaken. The cries carried through the night, and hope slowly slipped away. On the fifth day, the king decided to ride out, and the Rohirrim returned, charging like a storm to drive the enemy out. Saruman had fallen, but the war had not ended. Far to the east, Sauron unleashed his army toward Gondor. Minas Tirith was about to be besieged, and in that moment, the ancient oath was called upon. Théoden received the call for aid, and this time he did not hesitate, he did not weigh the risks, he did not retreat behind stone, he rode out. The king of Rohan led the riders east toward the Pelennor fields. There, they charged first against the orcs, and then against the Haradrim, with their great beasts looming over the field. Théoden was no longer fighting to preserve his people. Here, he fought for something greater than his crown. But that came at a cost. Théoden was struck down by the Witch King of Angmar, mortally wounded in the midst of the battle. The king, who had ridden out without hesitation, would not rise again. Yet, there was no despair in his passing. Théoden did not die as a broken ruler, nor as a king fighting to survive. He died as a true king, having answered his call. In that final hour, the oath sworn by his ancestors was fulfilled through him. Rohan did not endure because it hid behind walls. The kingdom of the Horse Lords endured because, in its darkest hour, its king remained faithful to what it was founded for. Théoden's story is not unique. It follows a pattern far older than Rohan. Tolkien, consciously or not, showed us a law that governs every kingdom, and it states, "Nothing in the kingdom changes until the king changes." The king within you governs order, direction, and sovereignty. The kingdom is the outer reflection of your inner order. When authority comes from below, the kingdom decays. When authority comes from above, the kingdom prospers. The crown points upward to the source of authority. Now I want to ask you these 3 questions. 1. Who is ruling within you right now? 2. What is their source of authority? Does authority come from above or from below? And 3. What does it even mean, authority coming from above to you? For some, it might mean aligning with higher values. For others, it might mean aligning with the will of the universe, or the creator. What I can tell you for sure is that the answer to those questions will shape every kingdom that you build. If these questions matter to you, I invite you to join 7 Days to Purpose. Link in the description. I'll see you there.